So, although you may dread the idea of doing a self portrait with this project, you'll see when you see the student work that there's a lot of really kind of fun ways to put yourself in the picture that makes it more amusing instead of embarrassing. And so, this student used the color scheme of Sprite, and then he put himself down here leaning against the wall. And some of the things we're going to learn is how to make a shadow, how to make yourself really seem like you're in that scene. And also, one of the key elements is to really think through a kind of pre visualizing where you would go in that environment and then posing appropriately. And so in this case, he was leaning against a wall and then had to cut himself out of a different wall and put himself there. I think he even added like some Sprite graffiti here. And so ultimately, what he did is he chose a picture that had very hard edge architecture in it. And this is the key to really making this project fun to do is you don't want things that are sort of brushy, that you would use a layer mask on, like foliage or, soft edges. You want this kind of hard edge look so that you can use the pen tool for what it's good at, which is straight lines, curves. So as you look for the appropriate picture to use and to colorize, this is going to be something you think about. So the next one is kind of funny because he actually put his head in here and he used the Chips Ahoy logo and color and even put a cookie over here. So I love that one. It's pretty funny. And this one, the student made herself so small. Okay, she's way back in here. And she was actually holding on to like a piece of wood to get her hands right. And so she said she wanted to make herself kind of like a little mouse in the picture. And so here's her product over here. And you can see that she colorized using that color palette. I love this color. This is from the Cocoa Pebbles. And so he, usually people put themselves way far back in the picture. And I think it's interesting that he put himself in the foreground. And oh, this one's so funny. So she used a secret deodorant as her color scheme. And she chose this picture, but the student is actually back here. And so she did kind of this humorous thing where she's in this scene. And that's a very distinct color scheme. And oh, this is amazing. So he used, remember this stuff? You put it on like hot cocoa. It's like whipped marshmallow. And that's a color palette. It's kind of from the 60s. I think it's still around though. And so then the setting and the color palette is amazing. And one of the keys is a lot of people think when you're colorizing, you want to have like a blank wall to put the color. But that's not true. What you actually want is a lot of texture, a lot of pattern, because what we're doing is we're going to use the pen tool to cut out an area. So like this whole red rug, he cut all the way around this, down around this chair, around there, came back in this way, and then closed the path. Then he fills that whole thing with red, and then we use a blending mode to blend the texture of what was originally there with the solid color. So when you have wallpaper like this, he didn't color in two different tones of this orange. what's happening is that it's one orange and the luminosity, the dark to light, is blending using a blending mode. So you want to look for a picture that actually has texture and has pattern to get this kind of look. This is a tricky thing to do, which is, this is actually two pictures. So she took one of herself looking into the mirror and then one reflected back. And so that's her color palette. He actually baked this cake for the picture. And I thought it was interesting that he turned himself into black and white. You can choose to keep yourself in color and wear appropriate colors for your product. Or in this case, I think it was because he was using a kind of retro product. So then he decided to do that, and it had an interesting effect. And this is a good one. She actually had her feet on something different and then cut that out. And if you're going to be sitting like this, you actually don't want a chair. I think she was on a stool, because if you had a chair there, then you'd have to cut that away to fit the other chair. So, for some reason, maybe even I think she was on the floor doing this. So she was kind of balancing like that. So there was nothing that was going to block her body. And then she put herself in using a layer mask there. This one just has some great graphics, and he's acting like he's repairing the floor. Oh yeah, excuse me. This one's great because she's in this swing photographing down, but actually she was standing up taking that photograph, and then she just made it look like she was horizontal there. And then this one's funny. This is that double picture thing again. But actually it's because she has a pregnancy test here. So this one was a little bit more edgy. And you can see by desaturating the photo and then we go back in and colorize it, it has a really interesting effect. This one, he found the perfect picture. He found a picture that he would fit into the demographic. This is actually the student over here. A lot of people think this was the student. So right away, it kind of fools you. And his product were these shoes and the color palette of that. And that worked out really well. And so you can see like he cut out all these spaces and colorized different parts of it. And this one, by the way, she made this reflection of herself down in here. And, she picked this picture because it had such a wild pattern. And so the yellow that you see in that wall isn't that she's coloring in each of these circles. That entire wall is yellow. And so her path had to like exclude this, and it's actually square all the way around, up and around this bed, around here, back up, and then connected. So this one doesn't have quite as much of these angular shapes, but it worked well in terms of large areas with pattern on it. And this one's kind of funny. She convinced me that this dress was architectural, which it is, and a cinnamon toast crunch. Yeah, so a sense of humor on that one. And then this one, this is the last one. She used the Kirkland toilet paper. And some of these, she was actually lying on the floor, wrapped herself in the toilet paper. So you can get as expressive as you want. But the key is to start with a good quality picture. That is so important because we're not covering it up like the other project. We're using the picture. Then we desaturate the picture. Then we use paths, and you're going to want to make each path on a separate layer. That's key. And I'd rather see quality paths than quantity. In other words, you don't want to have bad paths in this. It doesn't make sense to learn the tool and not be really precise with it. So hopefully that gave you an idea of how people approach this assignment and just think quality paths over quantity. All right, it's going to be fun.